these divided times that each and every one of us needs to take to our neighbors and friends. You know, we've all been through a lot over the past year. A global pandemic, civil unrest, a divisive election, tragedy at our nation's capital, and a new administration intent on further dividing our country as they advance the agenda of the radical left. But through it all, I want you to know that I have hope. You know, a pastor friend of mine once said, everybody's under-encouraged. So I want to encourage you tonight. And I want to remind you of two things. First, we've seen this movie before. In 2010, we had a Democrat president, Democrat majorities in both houses of Congress. I was there. I was serving as the House Republican Conference Chairman, and I remember, Joe, so do you, I remember how defeated we all felt. The hope and change had arrived, right? All the media had aligned itself, just as they are today, behind that new Democrat administration. But what happened then, and I believe will happen again, is that conservatives across America, in public office and in families and businesses alike, all rallied around the cause. We rallied around a positive agenda to offer, as President Reagan used to say, a choice, not an echo. A positive agenda built on our principles. And in 2010, we won 63 seats in the House of Representatives and retired Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. A couple years later, we won the Senate. In 2016, we won the White House, and we're going to do it all again in the next 4 years. So I want to encourage you. You know, Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. What is now has been before. You look back at 2010, you look back at 1994. It's going to look familiar. When you're talking to neighbors and friends and coworkers and people at worship and at work, just say, I ran into Mike the other day at the convention center, and he was like really optimistic. I mean, men and women, we have the winning agenda, and now it's incumbent upon us to take that winning agenda to the American people. In fact, I think we do well to heed the words of that 40th president. It was 1976. Some of us are old enough to remember it. He'd fallen short in the Republican nomination, but President Ford waved him up to the stage and invited him to bring some brief remarks. And he spoke off the cuff, but at the very end of his remarks, then Governor Reagan said these words. He said, "This is our challenge, better than ever before. We've got to quit talking to each other and about each other and go out and communicate to the world that we carry the message they've been waiting for. We must go forth from here united because there is no substitute for victory." That's then our cause. In the days that lie ahead, tell the story of the record and all that we accomplished over the last 4 years for the American people in security and prosperity and ensuring that our most cherished liberties are more secure in the courts of the land. We need to provide the loyal opposition, as so many Republicans across the country are doing, and I promise you I'll be doing as well. Pushing back on an administration and a liberal agenda being driven by the radical left. And finally, we got to guard our values, like the theme of this dinner, by offering a positive agenda to the American people, grounded in our highest ideals. Now, over the coming months, I'll have more to say about all of that, and I know you will too. But I want to encourage you tonight with a history and our record And I want to encourage you to have faith. You know, as I've traveled all across this country, I've become convinced more than ever of two things. In my time as vice president and my time in public life, that this is a freedom-loving nation. And this is a nation of faith. It truly is. The sweetest words I ever heard as I traveled around the country, and I heard them almost every day, was when someone would reach out, grab a hand, and look at me or my wife and just say, "I'm praying for you." And this is a nation of believers. And I truly do believe the progress we made over those 4 years in enduring the trials of the last year, we've been carried aloft by the prayers of the American people. And I believe with all of my heart in the boundless capacity of the American people. But also I believe this is a time when we ought to renew our faith in Him who placed this miracle of democracy on these wilderness shores. Because I say from my heart, God isn't done with America yet. As I close, let me say recently I had occasion to be reminded that even when it doesn't seem like it, God is at work. I got a letter last summer from a pastor in Middleburg, Florida. He told me of the time that he and his wife many years ago were in seminary. They just got married. And they were asked if they would organize a youth festival at Asbury Seminary that had been put on every year. The plan was to cancel it, but they were asked if they'd do the work. He wrote to me that all of his friends told him not to do it. He said, "It won't be good for your young marriage." But they said they prayed about it and decided that they'd go ahead and organize it. So they spent the whole year, and they arranged for contemporary Christian bands to be there and some wonderful preachers to be there. But in his letter, he told me that when the Saturday night came of the culminating evening of that youth festival, that it was raining. And he and his young bride walked through the grounds thinking that it had all been for naught. And then he wrote to me that that's because I didn't know that a future vice president of the United States would be giving his life to Jesus Christ that night. He said, "I cannot write that without tears, and I cannot recite it without it." I remember that night, sitting on that hillside. It was like I heard for the first time those words that God so loved the world, that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever might believe in Him might not perish but have everlasting life. And I stood up and I walked down, not out of a sense of intellectual agreement or assent, but because my heart was broken with gratitude for what had been done for me. I wrote that pastor back, and on a trip to Florida, I had a chance to meet he and his wife. They're wonderful people. And when I shook his hand, I just told him, now I know who else to thank for that night in 1978. You know, even in these challenging times, I think we do well to remember that ancient verse that's hung over the mantle of our home for 20 years. It's in Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And I believe, as everyone involved with Palmetto family believes, that if we will but put our trust in Him, if we will carry the message of our ideals and values to our neighbors and friends, there is a hope. There is a future. And the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come. Thank you. God bless you all, and God bless America.
Sun coming up over New York City. School bus driver in a traffic jam.
Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot beat that. We are getting ready to serve some dinner, so please take a moment to have